It was supposed to be just another quiet afternoon during one of Michael Jackson's rehearsals in Los Angeles. The stage was empty, the lights were low, and the echo of his last note still hung in the air. A member of his staff approached him holding a small box. No return address, no card, no explanation, just a simple ribbon tied carefully around it. Michael stared at the package for a moment, feeling an unfamiliar tension in his chest. He had received thousands of gifts from fans all over the world, but something about this one felt different. He opened it slowly, and what he saw inside made him step back, hand his mouth, eyes wide in disbelief. Within minutes, the room went silent, and what Michael chose to do next would be talked about for years. What was inside the gift? Why did it affect him so deeply? And what decision did he make that no one around him expected? Stay with me, because this story reveals a side of Michael Jackson that almost no one ever got to see. Before we continue, make sure you're subscribed and stay until the end, because what happens next is not just surprising, it's unforgettable. The rehearsal hall was nearly empty when the small package arrived. Michael Jackson had just finished another exhausting run-through of the choreography. Sweat dampened the collar of his black rehearsal shirt, and his breathing was still uneven as he lowered himself onto the edge of the stage. The room smelled faintly of resin, leather, and the metallic warmth of stage lights that had been burning for hours. He had dismissed most of the crew early that afternoon. The pressure of the upcoming show was enormous, and Michael preferred moments of quiet after long rehearsals. These were the few times when he could simply exist, without the cameras, without the expectations, without the noise of the world that constantly followed him. That was when Travis, one of the long-time production assistants, approached cautiously. "Michael," he said softly, holding a small, square box in both hands. "This came for you. The courier said it was urgent." Michael looked up. His expression shifted from exhaustion to mild curiosity. "From who?" he asked. Travis shook his head. "No name. No return address." Michael took the box slowly. It was surprisingly light, wrapped in deep blue paper with thin silver ribbon tied in a perfect bow. The package felt deliberate, not rushed, not careless. Whoever sent it had taken time. Michael turned it over in his hands, studying it. Strange. Almost all fan gifts were handled by staff and security, screened and cataloged before ever reaching him. Yet this one had somehow made it directly into the rehearsal hall. "Thank you," Michael said, nodding to Travis, who quietly stepped away. For a moment, Michael simply held the box. He could not explain why his heart had begun to beat a little faster. He had received paintings, letters, handmade dolls, clothing, jewelry, and countless symbolic objects from fans over the years. But this was different. There was something about the stillness of the room, the late afternoon light filtering through the high windows, the silence after hours of movement and music, and this small object resting in his palms. He untied the ribbon. Carefully, almost reverently, he peeled back the paper. Inside was a wooden music box, dark mahogany, polished smooth. It looked old, very old. Carved into the lid was a symbol he did not immediately recognize, a crescent moon cradling a star. Michael's breath caught. He opened the lid. A soft melody began to play. It was not one of his songs. It was something else, slower, fragile, haunting in its simplicity. The notes drifted through the empty hall like a whisper from another time. Inside the box lay a folded piece of paper and a small silver key. Michael froze. He did not touch anything for several seconds. The music played on, filling the room with a quiet sadness he could not name. Finally, he reached in and unfolded the note. The handwriting was careful, almost too careful, as if the person who wrote it had been afraid to make a mistake. "You once saved my life. You never knew. Now I am returning what you gave me." Michael's throat tightened. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the paper over. There was more. Follow the music. Use the key. That was all. No name. No date. No explanation. Michael closed the lid of the music box, but the echo of the melody remained in the air. His chest felt strangely heavy, as though something invisible had just been placed there. He looked around the empty hall. "Hello," he called softly, unsure why. No answer. The building was silent. Michael stood up slowly, the box still in his hands. A strange mixture of curiosity and unease crept through him. He was not afraid, but he was deeply unsettled. He could not shake the feeling that this gift was not meant for entertainment or nostalgia. It was meant to lead him somewhere. He turned the key over in his palm. It was old, too, silver, slightly tarnished, with delicate grooves along its stem. He tried it in the small lock on the side of the music box. It fit perfectly. The bottom of the box released with a faint click. Inside was something wrapped in yellowed paper. Michael removed it carefully and unfolded it. It was a photograph. He stared at it, his breath leaving him in a slow, silent exhale. The picture showed a much younger version of himself, no more than 20 years old, standing in the hallway of a hospital. He was smiling, kneeling beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of a thin young boy whose head was wrapped in bandages. Michael recognized the boy instantly. His name was Daniel. The memory rushed back with astonishing clarity. He had visited that hospital during the bad tour years ago. The visit had not been scheduled. He had slipped away from security after hearing about a child who was dying from a rare illness. He had stayed with Daniel for almost 2 hours, talking, singing softly, promising him he would be okay. Daniel had died 3 days later. Michael had never known anyone had taken a photo. His hands began to shake. Tucked behind the photograph was a thin notebook. He opened it. The pages were filled with writing. A story. Daniel's story. How that hospital visit had changed his life. How Michael's words, his attention, his kindness had given him courage when he thought he had none left. How his mother had kept that photograph on her wall for years. How, after Daniel's passing, she had devoted her life to helping children in the same ward. And now, the notebook had been sent back to Michael. At the back of the notebook was an address. Michael sat down slowly, the weight of the moment pressing against him. His eyes were wet. His lips parted, but no sound came. He had no idea who had sent the gift, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He was going to that address, and whatever waited for him there was about to change everything. Michael did not leave the rehearsal hall immediately. For a long time, he sat there in silence with the wooden music box resting on his knees, the notebook open in his hands. The words blurred and sharpened again as his eyes moved over them, as if his mind could not decide whether it was living the present or slipping back into the memory of a hospital corridor that smelled of antiseptic and hope and fear. Daniel, the name repeated in his thoughts like a soft echo. He remembered the boy's laugh, thin and breathless, the way his small fingers had wrapped around Michael's hand, as though that touch alone could anchor him to the world. He remembered promising Daniel he would come back. He never had the chance. Michael closed the notebook slowly. The address at the back of the final page pulsed in his mind like a heartbeat. He stood and walked toward the window at the far end of the hall. The late sun was sliding downward, casting long amber lines across the floor. Outside, the city moved as it always did, unaware that something inside Michael had just shifted. This was not a coincidence. He did not believe in coincidences. By nightfall, he was in the back seat of his car, moving quietly through the streets of Los Angeles. The driver glanced at him in the rear-view mirror once, curiosity in his eyes, but said nothing. Michael rarely spoke during drives. He was not alone, yet he felt completely isolated, wrapped inside his own thoughts. The address led them away from familiar lights and into a quieter neighborhood. Modest houses, narrow sidewalks, trees bending slightly in the evening breeze. When the car stopped, Michael remained seated for several seconds. A small blue house stood in front of him. The paint was chipped in places. The porch light flickered. Something about it felt heavy with memory. He stepped out of the car and told the driver he would call when he was ready. The front door opened before he even knocked. A woman stood there. Her hair was silver now, pulled back loosely, her face lined with years and sorrow and something else, recognition. "You're Michael," she said. Her voice was calm, steady, as if she had been waiting for him all along. "Yes," he replied quietly. She stepped aside. "Please come in." The house smelled of tea and old books. Framed photographs lined the walls. Michael's heart stuttered when he saw one of them. The same image in the music box, enlarged and resting in a simple wooden frame. Daniel. The woman watched his reaction. "My name is Evelyn," she said. Daniel's mother. Michael swallowed. I didn't know anyone had taken that picture," he said. "I asked the nurse to," Evelyn replied, "because I knew Daniel would want me to remember that day forever." They sat at a small table in the kitchen. She poured tea. Her hands trembled only slightly. "You were the light in his final days," she said softly. "After you left that room, he didn't cry again. He said he was no longer afraid." Michael looked down. "I wish I could have done more." "You did everything," Evelyn said. "You gave him peace, and you gave me purpose." She told him the rest of the story. How she had kept the notebook for years, how Daniel had written in it when he was strong enough, how she continued after his passing, volunteering in the hospital, reading the notebook to children who were afraid. "And then," she said, "my own health began to fail. I realized the story needed to come back to you." Michael's voice was barely above a whisper. "Why?" "Because you should know what your kindness became." She reached into a drawer and pulled out a letter. "This arrived for me last week. It was written by one of the children I now care for. She's dying too." Michael opened the letter. Inside, the child had drawn a picture of Michael with wings. The words at the bottom made his chest ache. "Tell him thank you for teaching Daniel how to be brave. Daniel taught me." Michael closed his eyes. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Evelyn leaned forward. "There is something else," she said. "Something Daniel asked me to give you if I ever found you again." She placed a small envelope on the table. Michael opened it slowly. Inside was a single page, written in a child handwriting. "If I don't make it, please don't be sad. I will watch over you when you sing. When you're scared, I'll be brave for you." Michael's breath broke. He pressed the page against his chest, his shoulders shaking in silence. He had walked into that hospital room years ago, believing he was offering comfort. He was only now realizing what he had been given in return. When he finally stood to leave, Evelyn touched his arm. "There's one more thing," she said. "The child who wrote that letter, she would love to meet you." Michael met her eyes. "When?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Tomorrow." The moment Michael Jackson closed the door behind him, the sound of the world seemed to disappear. The rehearsal hall was still, except for the soft hum of the lights and the distant noise of traffic outside. In his hands, the mysterious box felt heavier than it should have, as if whatever was inside carried more than just physical weight. He stood there for several seconds without moving, staring at it, replaying the reaction of the people around him. The way his choreographer had gone pale, the way his assistant had whispered, "Michael, are you okay?" when they saw his face change. He hadn't answered. He had simply walked out. Now he was alone. Slowly, carefully, Michael placed a box on a table near the mirror. His reflection stared back at him. Tired eyes, damp lashes, a face caught somewhere between shock and memory. He opened the lid again, though he already knew exactly what was inside. A photograph. Old, faded at the edges, slightly bent, as if it had been carried for many years. It showed a very young Michael, no more than 7 or 8, sitting on the steps of a small house in Gary, Indiana. His knees were scraped, his shirt oversized, his smile hesitant. Behind him stood a woman Michael had not seen in decades. Not his mother, not any relative he could immediately place. The woman's name came to him in a whisper. Eleanor. He sank into the chair. Eleanor had been a neighbor when the Jackson family was still unknown, when the world had not yet learned the name Michael Jackson. She used to watch him after school sometimes, before rehearsals took over his life. She was the one who gave him his first sketchbook, the one who told him he could draw as beautifully as he sang, the one who had held him once when he came to her door, crying, because his father had been angry after practice. Michael's fingers trembled as he lifted the photo. He had not thought of her in years. Beneath the photograph lay something else, a folded letter, written in careful, looping handwriting. He didn't open it yet. Instead, his mind drifted backward in time. The summer of that photograph had been the last summer Michael had any sense of being a normal child. After that, rehearsals became constant. Tours followed. Fame arrived like a tidal wave. And Eleanor quietly faded out his life, as everything else that wasn't music eventually did. Now here she was again. And the fact that someone had found this picture and sent to him unsettled him deeply. Michael finally unfolded the letter. Dear Michael, I don't know if you will remember me, but I have carried this picture of you for almost 50 years. I kept it because on that day, you told me you were afraid you would forget who you were when you grew up. You asked me to keep a piece of you safe in case you ever needed it. His breath caught. He remembered that conversation. He remembered the exact words. You said, promise me I'll still be me when I'm older. His eyes filled. I promised you I would remind you if the world ever tried to take that child away. Now my time is almost over. I have no family left and no one else to give this to. But I think it's time you saw him again. Michael pressed the paper to his chest. The world had taken so much from that boy on the steps, and he had let it. A knock at the door startled him. Michael, his assistant called softly. The crew's waiting. They're worried. He wiped his face, folded the letter, and placed everything back in the box. I'll be out in a minute, he said. But he knew he wouldn't go back to rehearsal the same. Something inside him had cracked open, something he thought fame, time, and success had sealed forever. When he returned to the room, everyone fell silent. Michael walked to the center of the floor. We're stopping for today, he said quietly. The choreographer stared. Michael, the schedule. I know the schedule, he replied, but today I need something else. They could hear it in his voice. This was not about rehearsal. This was about memory, about identity, about a promise a little boy once made on the steps of a small house. Michael turned and left again, the box held tightly against his chest, already knowing that the choice he was about to make would change everything. Michael drove without turning on the radio. Los Angeles blurred past the windshield. Sunlight washing over streets he had traveled 1,000 times before, but nothing about this moment felt familiar. The box sat on the passenger seat, like a silent passenger. Every red light, every turn, every passing face felt distant. His mind was somewhere else, on a porch in Gary, Indiana, where a boy once asked a woman to protect a piece of his soul. He had not gone to Gary in years. He had not allowed himself to think of that house, of those steps, of that summer. The life he had built since then was so enormous, so public, that the quiet child he had been sometimes felt like someone else entirely. But now that child had come back. He parked outside his home and sat in the car for a long time before getting out. The gates opened slowly, as they always did, but today the place felt different, emptier, too large, too quiet. The mansion had everything except the one thing the photograph reminded him of: simplicity. Inside, he carried the box upstairs to the room he used only when he needed silence. He locked the door. The afternoon sun poured through the curtains, landing across the floor like a path. He placed the box on the bed and opened it again. The photo, the letter, and something else he hadn't noticed before. A small cassette tape. His breath caught. He hadn't seen a cassette in years. A label was written carefully on the side. For Michael, when you're ready. He moved to the old stereo system in the corner, the one he kept for sentimental reasons, and slid the tape inside. The soft click of the machine echoed in the quiet room. For a moment he hesitated, finger hovering above the button. Then he pressed play. Static, a breath, and then a voice. Not Eleanor's. His own. Hi. Soft. Young. I'm 8 years old today, the boy's voice said. And I'm recording this because Miss Eleanor says when you grow up, you might forget how you feel right now. So I'm going to tell you. Michael covered his mouth. I'm scared a lot, but I love music, and I love drawing. And sometimes I just want to sit on the steps and watch the cars go by and think about places I've never been. I hope you still do that, Michael. I hope you still know how to be quiet inside. The recording paused. Then Eleanor's voice came in, warm and steady. He's a special boy, she said, and the world is going to be very loud around him. But if you're listening to this, it means you found your way back. The tape ended. Michael didn't move. Tears slid silently down his face. He had spent decades performing for millions, speaking to the world, shaping sound and motion and spectacle. Yet this small, fragile recording shattered him more completely than any stage ever had. He sat on the bed as evening crept into the room. For the first time in years, Michael felt something he had forgotten how to name. Home. Not a place. A feeling. And it was calling him somewhere he had been running from. He stood suddenly. He picked up the phone and dialed his assistant. "I need a flight to Indiana," he said. "Tonight." There was a pause. Michael, the tour schedule. "I know," he said. "I'll explain later." He hung up before anyone could argue. That night, Michael Jackson left Los Angeles quietly. No announcement. No cameras. No entourage. Just a man, a photograph, and a promise made by a child who had waited 50 years to be heard again. The sun had already begun its slow descent when Michael returned from the long walk around the lake near the old house in Gary. The air smelled of grass, rusted metal, and distant rain, the same scent he remembered from childhood. Everything felt strangely smaller now. The street, the fences, the porch where he once sat with Eleanor, the steps where he had promised her he would never forget who he was. But what had changed most was him. He sat in the quiet guest room that night with the box once again open on the bed. The photograph, the letter, the cassette. He had not played the tape again, but he could still hear the voice of the boy he used to be. That boy was no longer lost. He had been waiting. Michael opened the letter again, this time reading it more slowly. "You didn't lose yourself. You just hid." He whispered the words out loud. For decades, Michael Jackson had been the most visible person on the planet, and the most invisible to himself. The gift was not the photograph, not the tape, not even Eleanor's words. The gift was the permission to return. He thought of the years of pain, the pressure, the endless expectations. The world had built a legend. The legend had nearly crushed the man. Fame had turned his voice into gold, but his heart into a cage. He remembered how Eleanor used to say, "Your life doesn't belong to the world, Michael. It belongs to you." He had never understood what she meant until now. Later that night, he drove to a small diner outside town, the same one his mother used to take him when he was a boy. He sat in a corner booth alone. No one recognized him at first. The hat, the glasses, the silence. They kept him ordinary. The waitress approached. "What can I get you, sweetheart?" He hesitated, then smiled. "Apple pie," he said, "and tea." She nodded and walked away. For the first time in years, no one expected anything from him. No autograph, no performance, no explanation. Just a man eating pie in a quiet place. He watched the family 2 booths away. A father helping his daughter color. A mother laughing softly. A little boy swinging his feet under the table. His chest tightened. All those years he had chased love from the world while the simplest version of it had always been right there, in moments like this. After the diner, Michael returned to the old house. He stepped onto the porch and sat on the same broken step, where he and Eleanor once talked about the future. He looked up at the stars. The Indiana sky felt larger than Los Angeles, not because it was, but because here no one owned it. He closed his eyes. "I'm here," he whispered. "I found my way back." When he returned to Los Angeles days later, something in him had changed. He canceled several meetings, delayed rehearsals, turned off his phone for hours at a time. His staff was confused. The industry buzzed with rumors. But Michael felt calm. He started visiting children's hospitals again, not with cameras, not with announcements, just quietly, sitting with kids, listening, holding hands, telling stories. He brought the photograph once and showed it to a little girl with leukemia. "That's me," he said, "when I was your age." She smiled. "You look scared." He laughed softly. "I was. But you're not now." He shook his head. "Not anymore." One afternoon, he called his mother. "Catherine," he said, "do you remember Eleanor?" There was a pause. "Of course I do. She used to watch you when you were little." "Why?" "She left me something," he said, "before she passed." Another pause. "I think," Michael said, "she saved me." Catherine's voice cracked. Maybe she just reminded you who you already were. That night, Michael wrote in his journal for the first time in years. Not lyrics, not plans, not fears, just the truth. I spent my life trying to become something the world wanted. I almost forgot the boy who wanted to become himself. The mysterious gift had not changed the past, but it had rewritten his future. And for the first time in a very long time, Michael Jackson was no longer running. He was finally home. The quiet that followed the gift was different from any silence Michael had ever known. It was not the hollow silence of hotel rooms after concerts, not the suffocating silence of loneliness inside crowds, not the heavy silence of exhaustion after endless rehearsals. This silence felt alive. He spent the morning sitting by the large window in his Los Angeles home, sunlight pouring across the floor. The photograph rested on the table beside him. The cassette lay next to it. The letter remained folded in his pocket, where he could feel it whenever doubt tried to creep back in. For the first time in years, he had nowhere he needed to be. The world expected him to prepare for the greatest comeback in music history. Michael expected himself to finally breathe. He walked barefoot through the house, touching the walls, the piano, the hallway mirrors. For so long those mirrors had frightened him, not because of what he saw, but because of what he didn't. Now, when he paused before one, he did not search for the king of pop. He searched for the boy in the photograph, and he found him. Later that day, he gathered his children in the living room. Prince sat cross-legged on the carpet. Paris leaned against the couch, and Blanket hugged his pillow tightly. They watched him with the quiet seriousness children use when they sense something important is coming. "I want to tell you a story," Michael said. They leaned closer. He told them about Gary, about the porch, about Eleanor, about the box, about the boy in the picture, who didn't know who he would become, but hoped. When he finished, Prince spoke first. "So you were afraid too?" Michael nodded. "All the time." Paris smiled. "You don't look afraid now." He reached for her hand. "Because I finally remembered something." "What?" Blanket asked. "That being human is more important than being perfect." They didn't answer, but they understood. That evening, Michael returned to the studio. The room was dark except for a single lamp near the piano. He sat down, rested his fingers on the keys, and let them move. No plan, no pressure, no deadlines. The melody that emerged was soft and uncertain, like footsteps in snow. Then it grew warmer, then stronger, then free. He sang quietly, not for an album, not for the world, for himself. Hours later, when he finally stopped, the room felt different, lighter. The song had no name yet, but already had a soul. He wrote in his journal again. Maybe the world doesn't need another legend. Maybe it just needs people brave enough to be real. Days passed. The gift stayed on his bedside table. He canceled another interview, postponed another meeting, walked alone through the garden at night, listening to crickets, remembering Indiana. The tabloids whispered. The industry panicked. Michael smiled. He called his mother again. "I'm not chasing anymore," he told her. She laughed softly. "Good." He visited a children's shelter the following week. No cameras, no staff, just Michael, a bag of toys, and his guitar. He sang for them, talked with them, sat on the floor. One boy asked him, "Are you famous?" Michael thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he said. "Mostly I'm just me." The boy shrugged. "That's better." Michael felt something inside him finally settle. That night, he placed the photograph back into the box and closed it. He didn't lock it away. He set it on the shelf where he could see it whenever he wanted, a reminder of where everything began. The boy in the photo no longer felt like someone he had lost. He felt like someone he had finally found. Michael lay in bed as the city hummed outside. Fame, pressure, history, expectation, they were still there, but they were no longer louder than his own heartbeat. He whispered into the darkness, "Thank you, Eleanor." And for the first time in a very long time, sleep came easily, not because the world had changed, but because he had.